welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 436, and today's date is August 8th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Central Bankers U.S. Government Set the Stage for the False Flag Event. And what are we seeing here? Well, we know Congress, they are on vacation. President Obama decided that he was going to conduct an airstrike inside Iraq to bring humanitarian aid to the people because of the Islamic State. Now, we have to back up for a second here. The Islamic State has been created by the United States, Israel, UK, and other Arab nations and private Western Central Bank nations. It was created for this purpose, to create chaos in this region. And we can see already the stage has been set. And what I mean by this is, if you go back to a couple of reports, the Islamic State specifically said, if we are attacked, we will hit the United States and its interests all over the world. And we can see right now this has been planned from the beginning. So we have Congress on vacation. Obama decided to do something right now, which is an airstrike on the Islamic State, and it's continuing. And we're heading into this fall. Of course, the Fed is going to be exiting the stimulus, which is an illusion. They're just going to be doing it in a different way. And we realize they need to start a war. They need some type of an event, and they're setting the stage right now, and they're going to bring this home here. And we can see right now it is building. This is the first stage, attack. Now let's see what the Islamic State does. So we can see, and we know already, that the government has shipped out bombs all over the world to different embassies, and I reported on this a couple of reports ago, and they are just now been delivered, and they're just sitting there waiting. Okay, we understand that. We also understand the borders are wide open for all these so-called terrorists, which are agents of CIA, government, and they have been placed within the United States. They are ready to go. They're sleeping right now, and when they're called upon, terror will strike inside the United States, because we have to remember, and we have to go back, that there have been lone wolf groups inside the United States. They can't keep track of them, and guess what? They know how to make bombs, and they're creating a new stealth bomb which cannot be detected. So something could have entered the United States and no one knows about it. So we can see how they're building this up. Now, this terror attack that's going to eventually come, because we know, we can see all the indicators now, and it's all coming together basically, and we can see that this most likely will be in a multi-stage type of an event. I mean, we're going to see the Islamic State, but they want to bring in Russia somehow, and we might see that Russia said they saw an opportunity to wage a cyber attack against the power infrastructure. They saw an opportunity to hit the financial institutions. Now, you have to remember, Russia really doesn't have to do anything like this whatsoever. Basically, they can get together with China and the other BRIC nations and say, you know what? Let's start dumping the treasury bonds, and it would collapse the United States in a split second. So they really don't have to do any of this stuff, but they need to bring all this in, and they need to make sure that we understand that Russia was part of it, China is going to be part of it, and we need to get into the Middle East. So we're going to see many different stages of this as this builds up. And Obama right now is laying the path out now for the next event. We can see him pushing, and this is exactly what they've been planning all along, because we have to understand the economy is falling apart. There's no way around it, and they're doing many different things to keep the illusion alive, but I don't think it's going to work. I think it's eventually just going to collapse around them, and they need this event to occur before the collapse. They cannot wait, because if the collapse occurs and then they have the event, it makes no sense at that point. So they need something before the collapse happens, and they are definitely running out of time here. Now let's get into the economic collapse news. Now what we're seeing here is the economists, the government, the Fed, they're all talking about the U.S. labor costs, and right now the second quarter U.S. labor costs miss after a massive one-off spike revision in first quarter. And what we're seeing right now, that there is no wage growth, and it's not right around the corner. Nothing is growing at this point. Wages are not increasing. Everything is declining right now. Actually, they were expecting a 1% rise, and what they're seeing right now is a 0.6 rise. So they completely missed right now. Now, what else are we seeing? Well, a couple reports ago I told you about how they manipulate GDP, and they were using inventories to really keep the inventories to build up the GDP, and eventually they were going to have to sell off those inventories, and this is what happened in the first quarter. But what we're seeing right now is wholesale inventories rose only 0.3% in June, the same pace as in May, missing by the most since February 2013. With GDP now basically an exercise in inventory expansion and contraction, the second quarter inventory estimate amount to 40% of GDP. This miss offers a little hope for the initial second quarter rebound to hold its exuberance. In addition, wholesale sales also missed, up only about 0.2% against expectations of about 0.7%, with growth slowing for the third month in a row. The result is that the $675 billion rise in nominal GDP in the past year, a whopping 52% or over half, is due to nothing else but inventory hoarding. And what we're seeing right now is that this is going to come to an end. Probably the third quarter, we're going to see a disaster number in GDP. It's going to completely collapse on itself. Now, the Fed did a study, and it shows that 40% of the households show signs of financial stress. 4 out of 10 American households were straining financially 5 years after the Great Recession, many struggling with, tight credit, education, debt, retirement issues. And you have to remember, all this came about is because a lot of people lost their jobs, they lost their homes, 38% lost their wealth, and they've been trying to recover since that time period. And 42% reported that they had delayed a major purchase or expense directly due to the recession. 18% put off what they considered to be a major life decision as a result of the recession back in 2008. 61% reported that they expected their incomes to stay the same in the next 12 months. The most common reason cited by renters for renting rather than owning was they couldn't come up with the down payment. About 45% of the people said they just don't make enough right now, and they cannot save the money to come up with a down payment. 29% said, listen, my credit is shot, I cannot get a mortgage. So we can see right now the American people, they're completely tapped out. 57% reporting using some or all of their savings in the Great Recession, and right now a lot of these people have no savings, and that's a lot of people. And again, as time goes on and people are being laid off in these corporations, they're going to dip into their savings. So the savings rate is going to continually go down. Then they'll go to their credit cards, they will max those out, and they'll continually look for jobs, and things just will not work out for many of the people that are out there. And right now, 48% of the people saying that if there's some type of hypothetical emergency costing about $400, they would be able to cover that without selling anything, but 52% would have to sell something to cover that $400 expense. So that tells you almost half of the American people are really in bad shape. And we have to go back to 2008. I mean, think about the foreclosures and all of the people that had their credit ruined because of the foreclosures and not being able to pay their credit cards because they can't find a job, and all those people who've accepted another job but are receiving less now, or had to find a part-time job because there were no full-time jobs out there, and of course those people who just couldn't find a job again. Now, we understand that most of the people can't buy housing here in the United States, and this is why the Fed has been using free money, delivering it to hedge fund and investment companies to pump up the market by buying houses in cash, either holding it or renting it if they can. There are also foreign investors coming in buying houses in cash, and this is why we see all the major mortgage corporate companies laying off thousands of people, and a lot of mortgage companies are closing at this point because they realize the American people, they're not taking out mortgages, and this is why we see mortgages and refinancing continually declining every single week. And we're coming out of the hot season right now, heading into fall and winter, where things really start to slow down, dry up, and this is going to be a nightmare. Now, the Fed, U.S. government, realize that this is going to be a major, major problem. They see problems in the housing market, and they're getting worried. And they're coming up with all these different ways of trying to pump up the housing market. And one of the ways they're going to do it is they're going to change the definition of the FICO score. And of course, they use this to base mortgages on. So they're going to help the people out. You know, all those people that have really, really bad credit, that have no money. Well, they're going to make it even easier for those people to get housing, and they're hoping that those people come into the market. Right now, a shocking 77 million Americans currently face debt collectors. 77 million Americans effectively have zero access to credit because of partial defaults. They no longer are eligible whatsoever. So what they're doing right now is they're going to change the definition of FICO and do some credit score recalculations on consumers failing to pay a bill if the bill has been paid or settled with a collection agency. So what they're going to do is say, you know what? We won't count that in the score, and we'll make your score a little bit higher. They will also give less weight to unpaid medical bills that are with a collection agency. In doing so, it will make it easier for tens of millions of Americans to get loans. As of July, about 64.3 million consumers in the U.S. had a medical collection on their credit report, and of the 106.5 million consumers with a collection on their report, 9.4 million had no balance and won't be penalized under the new credit score system. So we can see right now they are continually manipulating the system because they realize if they kept the system the way it was, it would implode right now, and they need to keep this going a little bit longer. So what have they done so far? They've manipulated unemployment, they've manipulated GDP, they manipulated inflation, and now they're manipulating the FICO score. So they're trying everything and anything to keep this system going so they can get that event to occur. And remember, that event has to come before the collapse, and they realize the Fed is exiting in October. A lot of stock market crashes happen in October. They've already maneuvered and started the chain reaction of this false flag event. Now, Russia and China, they're looking out and they're seeing what's going on here, and they're saying, whoa, wait a minute here. We need to really protect ourselves. So Russia and China's central banks have agreed to a draft currency swap agreement, which will allow them to increase trade in domestic currencies and cut the dependence of the U.S. dollar in bilateral payments. The agreement will stimulate further development of direct trade in yuan and rubles on the domestic foreign exchange markets of Russia and China. Currently, right now, 75% of payments in Russia and China trade settlements are made in U.S. dollars, and they're going to start changing that up and decreasing the amount that they use in dollars. And we can see right now they need to do this because they see war on the horizon. They realize the dollar's collapsing, and they really are pushing right now to get this done. Now, we understand the U.S. passed that law, FATCA, and what we're seeing right now is record number of Americans renounce citizenship under Obama. According to the latest data released by the Federal Register, the number of U.S. citizens who no longer want to be who don't want to be staying here in the United States has increased. About 1,577 people gave up their nationality at U.S. embassies in the 6 months through June. So we can see this is really ramping up. It is increasing, and it's not slowing down. Now, it looks like the border agents are reporting that, yes, gang members found a loophole to come into the country. They come in with women and children, and the United States government takes them and puts them with their existing families here in the United States. A Border Patrol agent claims that the federal government is allowing murderers from Central America to be released into the U.S. If they have family in the United States, they'll release them to the family, even if they're admitted gang members. We've had a couple that had admitted to murders in their home country. They were 17, 16 years old, and the United States government thought it fit to release them to their parents here in the United States. Well, actually, they should have been turned around. Actually, all of these illegals need to be turned around, and they need to come through the proper channels. And the reason why we have the proper channels is to keep the people who have sicknesses or diseases, who are criminals, who are part of gangs, who are part of the drug cartel. It's to weed those people out, and this is why the system is set up. But again, Obama is leaving the borders wide open. This is part of his agenda. Now, it looks like China is planning to build lighthouses on 5 islands in the South China Sea, and of course this is pissing off Vietnam, Japan, Philippines, all the other countries around the South China Sea, and of course this is being done to show that yes, these are our islands, we're placing them there, and all of this is about provoking, and we can see right now that Vietnam is making a huge deal over this, Japan is making a huge deal over this, of course Japan named some of the islands, and all of this is starting to really ramp up right now. And again, that is one of the flashpoints. The Pacific is a flashpoint. The Obama administration had the pivot to Asia to encircle and contain China. We have the pivot to Eastern Europe to pretty much encircle and contain Russia. We have the flashpoint in the Middle East, the flashpoint in Africa, and everything right now is completely out of control. Now, it looks like the so-called sanctions on Russia are really backfiring on Europe and the United States. And Russian importers started canceling orders from the EU suppliers this morning. They are turning trucks away. Despite President Obama telling us that Russia is increasingly being isolated and Russia will not be able to survive, they're going to be starving their people because of these sanctions and because what they decided to do where they're not accepting food from the U.S. and the EU and many other countries, and what we're really seeing is that no, Russia has really moved from importing food from the United States and Europe and moved over to the BRIC nations. I mean, Russia can replace meat imports from the US, EU, Canada, Australia with supplies from Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Argentina, and Belarus. Dairy, cheese, butter, powdered milk can be imported from South America, New Zealand. Vegetables could be substituted from Turkey, Argentina, Chile, China. Fruits and berries, apples, pears, can be imported from Argentina, Chile, China, and Serbia. So we can see right now all this talk about how Russia is isolating themselves, that this is going to really have a bad effect on them, and how their people are going to be starving. Well, again, it's always the opposite. Whatever the government officials are saying, it is always the opposite. And we can see they've been telling us that yes, this is hurting Russia, but what we're really seeing, it's hurting the EU, it's hurting the United States. Think about how much we export and the EU exports out. Now all of a sudden they just lost that business. So these businesses will start hurting. Once these businesses start hurting, what happens? Oh, we don't need as many people, so they start laying off people. Now there's more people out of work. This will only hurt the European Union and the United States. Now, Russia is looking to pretty much get all their aerospace components from China. Now, right now, they do not get their aerospace components from China, but what they're doing is, again, they're pretty much separating themselves from the Western bank countries. They realize war is coming. They can't be dependent on anything outside. They need to be dependent on themselves, and this is exactly what they're doing. Russian aerospace and military industrial enterprises will purchase electronic components worth several billion dollars from China. We do work with China Aerospace Science and Industry Corporation. Its institutions have already offered us a few dozen items representing a direct alternative to a slight modifications of the elements we will no longer be able to acquire because of the sanctions introduced by the United States. So it looks like they are moving forward and saying, okay, we have these sanctions, we'll just turn in a different direction. And of course, these countries where Russia is purchasing from, they will see a rise in their economy. And guess what? To purchase all these goods, they're not going to use the U.S. dollar. Now, Yatsenyuk is out there and he's screaming and yelling, saying that Ukraine would put an end to its gas dependency on Russia against all odds. We simply do not have another choice, Yatsenyuk said, adding the loans of international financial institutions, including the World Bank, would help Ukraine to fight its economic and financial woes. But we can see right now that Ukraine has no industry at this time. It is collapsing. They don't have the southeastern section. They don't have Crimea. They have the west. It is falling apart, and they're just hurting themselves. And right now Ukraine is saying, oh yeah, we're going to be placing sanctions on Russia. We're going to put about 172 people on the list and about 65 companies, which I really don't think it really matters. But by placing all these sanctions and doing what Yatsenyuk wants to do, Ukraine is going to lose about $7 billion in the first year due to the Russian sanctions that he just placed on Russia. Again, these people don't care. They just want to keep getting debt, keep getting debt, that's their whole agenda. They don't care about revenue, building the company up. Nope. Take the country, get all the resources you possibly can, put them into as much debt as possible, and this is the strategy. Now it looks like the ceasefire with Israel and Gaza has come to an end. Now what happened was they were having a discussion, not really a discussion, it was really an ultimatum. Israel said, listen, we're going to go back to the way it was, the borders are going to stay closed, we're going to have tight sanctions on you, the tunnels are destroyed, and you need to give us all your weapons. What, you don't agree? And Hamas said, absolutely not, we're not going back to that, and they decided that the ceasefire is over. But of course, in the corporate media and everywhere else, it makes it look like Hamas just started firing. But no, that's not how it was. You can compare this to the Ukraine. When Poroshenko says, okay, we have a ceasefire, and here's the ceasefire. Lay down your weapons, put your hands up in the air, surrender. We will then put you in jail, and we'll take over the southeastern section. This is what Israel is basically saying to the people in Gaza. Now, Israel is very nervous because they are being brought up on war crimes by the Palestinians. And Netanyahu wants members of U.S. Congress on Wednesday to help him with the International Criminal Court. He wants, of course, the United States there to veto anything that's going to happen, and he wants them to help them out. So they must be very, very nervous because a lot of the world opinion is looking at the situation and saying, you know what, you went in there, you killed the infrastructure. We never saw any weapons whatsoever. It almost sounds like the United States during the first Iraq invasion where they said there was weapons of mass destruction and there was nothing there. Well, we saw pictures of all the buildings. They've never showed any weapons there whatsoever. And this is why they had to destroy the infrastructure. They were killing children for absolutely no reason, and I heard a lot of the corporate media out there saying, well, if these children are related to those parents who are terrorists, then they have to be killed. Well, that is absolutely ridiculous. For example, your children, if you decide to commit a crime, do your children go to jail? No. If your parents kill someone and they're on death row, do you as a child go on death row? No. Their mentality is completely off. They killed innocent people, and the world is looking at this and saying, why did you do this, and why did you have to destroy everything in Gaza? What was the purpose, and why were you killing women and children? Why were you aiming at ambulances, hospitals? And right now there's absolutely no proof whatsoever that there were weapons in any of these buildings. So right now the United Nations has upgraded the status of Palestine to almost the state level, and what they're saying is that Palestine would be able to apply for membership of the International Court and also be able to pursue human rights charges and war crimes against Israel. Now, of course, the United States is going to step in and veto and try to stop this as best they possibly can because, again, Israel pays all these government officials quite a bit of money for their campaigns. Now, a couple days ago, reported on how Marie Harf was, and she's the U.S. State Department deputy spokesperson, was out there reporting, and she kind of slipped up and said the Ebola attack. And right now, her comments were that there was an Ebola attack, and there were comments that were raised and concerns that a weaponized form of the virus may have been used by a rogue terrorist organization in Africa. So we can see this is starting to build up. Now, there's also experts from Russia and UK saying yes, the Ebola virus can be weaponized. And what's very interesting about this, the bioweapon would have no signature compared to like a nuclear weapon or a dirty nuke, because you can track those isotopes down. A bioweapon is very different. This could be created in a small lab, and it could be used then, and it would be very, very hard to track. And biological weapons are nothing like nuclear bombs. In order to make a nuclear bomb, one would require uranium, a nuclear bomb plant, and so on. But a biological weapons are made in a small laboratory which can be easily camouflaged. And one of the Russian scientists was saying that I'm concerned about the prevalence and pathogenicity of the situation, which is too much even for Ebola. Too many people are dying. I don't rule out that there's something artificial here. What is happening with Ebola there could be also be something man-made about it. And let me just say, we understand, first of all, that there was Tulane University and other U.S. government agencies down in Africa experimenting with Ebola. We see that CDC has a patent on this, and we can see that if you're creating a vaccine for a certain strain of Ebola, the vaccine has to work with that strain. So all of this is starting to really come out now that this could have been manufactured. Now, we kind of believe this from the past here, that yes, it seems like something is happening and they're pushing this type of agenda forward. And of course, we had information that Boko Haram wanted to create a dirty Ebola bomb. And right now what we're seeing is that the United States, the president, is saying that he's not very concerned it can be controlled. And like I say, always think the opposite. And the opposite is that they're going to spread this across the country. And this is why they have the borders open right now. And they're really not checking that many people, because a lot of people coming in who already have the symptoms won't even know it until much later. And by that time, it will be too late, and I believe this is what's going on right now. Now, it looks like Obama has pretty much ordered the military airstrikes in Iraq to hit the Islamic State. Now, they're not trying to destroy the Islamic State. They just want to hit him a couple times to make it look good, so when the Islamic State creates the false flag event, we know who the enemy is and where we need to go. And this is the first stage of this. And right now it seems like the second round of bombings have occurred on a target northwest of Erbil in Iraq, and we can see right now this is really starting to move forward. Now, of course, France is behind this, and they're saying, yes, we're all for it. Let's go after Iraq, and we will do our part. Well, of course they're saying this, and they were the first ones out there last year when we had the false flag chemical weapons attack in Syria. They were the first ones out there because their economy is collapsing. All these nations in the private Western Central Bank countries are ready for this to happen because their countries are collapsing and there's no way to stop it. Right now, the FAA bans all U.S. flights over potentially hazardous Iraq airspace, and this is going to be in effect until December 31st of 2014. How interesting. Why would they pick that date? Because what's happening here is the stage has been set. The Islamic State now, it's all over the news that the Islamic State is looking to get back at the United States. And of course, a Congressman, Adam Kinzinger, is out there saying that this is ridiculous. This is not even going to help. The Islamic State can't be destroyed by this few bombs. But this is not what they want to do. They don't want to destroy the Islamic State. It's their creation. they're controlling them. They want it just enough to make it look good, and this is exactly what they're doing. And of course, this is taking time. During the time that Congress is in recess, Obama all of a sudden decided to have an airstrike, and we can see how this is starting to ramp up. Now, Kerry was out there on Friday, and he's saying, which is today, saying that the United States is running out of time with regards to Iraq. Now, what he's saying is that the United States is collapsing. We're running out of time. We really need to start this event. Violence and terrorist campaign waged by organizing Islamic State against innocent people is a serious warning, and this is absolutely not acceptable according to the United States. Well, I hate to say this, but Israel is killing children, women and children in Gaza, and they don't even say anything. Innocent people who are just playing on the beach, who are sitting in a school, and they're being killed. But here in Iraq, where the Islamic State is, because this is their mission, this is their agenda, this is why all the focus is placed here. Now, what's very interesting is that while the airstrikes are happening, the ceasefire was pretty much done. Is it a coincidence that it happened at the same exact time? No, this was planned. All of this has been planned. Don't you realize every time something like this happens, it is a specific plan. It is not coincidence. Now, of course, the bombing inside Iraq is running against the United States, the American people. It's very unpopular. People are like, we don't need to go back to Iraq. We don't need to be bombing inside Iraq. We really don't need to be there. And right now, it's very unpopular among Americans. They want the war in Iraq to be finished, not started again. Now, ISIS demands American blood, and what's happening right now is they're calling an all-out attack on U.S. interests worldwide. Now, I said this in the beginning of the report. If we go back when I reported on that explosives were being delivered to all the different embassies within the world, the Islamic State said, if we are attacked, we will take this out on American interests, and then we will move to the people inside the United States. So we can see right now, this is completely a setup. I mean, they're playing it out perfectly. And ISIS, the Islamic State, is also saying that they will raise the flag of Allah in the White House, that they're coming after the White House. Now, we had information before, and this was about North Korea, who was going to hit the White House with a nuclear bomb, and now we have the Islamic State saying they're coming for the White House. Now, we can see right now that all of this has been planned. This has been part of the overall plan to cover up this economic collapse. Now, this is might occur in many, many different stages, like I said before, and we really need to be prepared. I mean, let's step back and take a look at what's been happening here. Now, we have the Islamic State in the Middle East causing complete chaos. We have the U.S. forces in Africa, where China is, and many different war skirmishes going on there. We have Ukraine completely falling apart. We have Libya right now taking back its country. Lebanon doing the same thing. Yemen doing the same thing. So the central bankers are completely losing control in the Middle East. And we have other flashpoints going on around the world. We also have our borders wide open with illegals coming in, so-called lone wolf groups who can make bombs. We have drug dealers coming in, criminals coming in, and again, people from Africa or anyone that's infected with Ebola can come across the border, and no one will be the wiser. They get a court date, in 2020. They set them up in a huge area where other illegals are. They all get affected. Then they're released into 23 cities across the United States, which completely matches up with all the quarantine centers, which I reported on before. So you can see how all of this is fitting together right now. And now we have Obama using airstrikes in Iraq, doing exactly what they were going to do to create an event where the Islamic State has already said they will retaliate one way or another. So we can see how all this is coming down the road here, and we're getting closer and closer to that fall date where the Fed is going to be out of the stimulus deal here, and of course they're just maneuvering funds to many different areas. And we can see right now that the economy is collapsing. They're doing everything they possibly can to manipulate and to keep this thing going. But what we're seeing is a lot of the numbers, their illusionary numbers, are moving and separating itself from the real economy. And we know there's more layoffs coming. We know real estate is heading into the fall and winter, and they know this too, and this will be collapsing. So everyone really needs to start prepping right now. I mean, really ramping it up, because I really do believe from all these indicators right now that we are heading down a path where we're going to be hitting a very, very big event. And you have to remember, all our government officials have been telling us that with the Islamic State, the next event is going to be a lot worse than 9/11. And we already know they're implicating Russia in with a digital bomb in the financial institution and a secret malware in the power infrastructure. So we can see all this coming down the line, and everyone needs to really start getting prepared, because you don't want to be left out, especially if there is some type of martial law. Because of Ebola, that'd be step one. Once that happens, then all of a sudden the United States is attacked by, from inside the United States, and letting everyone know it was the Islamic State or Russia. But we could see different bioweapons going off, different dirty nukes going off, the power grids coming down. So you need to make sure that you have the food, the water, the supplies, because if Ebola is out there, you don't want to be rushing to the supermarkets. If the power does go out, you want to make sure that you have enough to stay indoors and maintain your life. And also you need weapons to protect yourself. You also need gold and silver, but I would worry more about getting batteries, medical supplies, toiletries, food, and those type of things right now, because we can see everything. It is completely ramping up. There is no stopping it at this point. And they know it, and this is why we're really moving fast right now. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.